At my daughter's wedding, her pompous and contemptuous fiancé pointed at me and barked at the waiters. "Don't serve this old man!" The guests froze in shock, but I just smiled. One of the waiters replied, "This is his restaurant." The groom dropped his glass of champagne, and in that moment, his world turned upside down. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The sound of an expensive engine cut through the quiet Saturday evening air in Evanston. I watched from my kitchen window as Daniel's sleek BMW pulled into my driveway, its chrome gleaming under the streetlights. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the dinner table one last time. Sarah had been talking about this moment for weeks. Her fiancé, the man who'd stolen her heart. The car door slammed shut with that particular sound of German engineering. I dried my hands on the dish towel and walked to the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Interesting. Neighborhood, Daniel's voice carried through the evening air as he surveyed the modest houses lining our street. Bit dated, isn't it? My jaw tightened, but I forced a smile as I opened the door. He stood there in an expensive suit, his eyes already cataloging everything about my home with obvious disappointment. The handshake he offered was brief, perfunctory. "Dad, this is Daniel." Sarah's voice bubbled with nervous excitement as she appeared behind me. "Daniel, my father, Thomas Wilson." "Pleasure," Daniel said, though his tone suggested otherwise. His gaze swept past me into the house, and I caught that barely concealed wince. "Welcome to our home," I managed, stepping aside. "Sarah's told me so much about you." We moved into the kitchen where I'd spent the afternoon preparing dinner. Homemade lasagna, garlic bread, Sarah's favorite Caesar salad. The whole house smelled like oregano and love. "You did all this yourself?" Daniel asked, examining the modest spread with raised eyebrows. "How quaint." "This is where I raised Sarah after her mother died," I said quietly, watching his expression. "For us, it's home." Sarah jumped in quickly. "Dad's an amazing cook. He taught me everything I know about—" "Well, the main thing is your daughter's happy, right?" Daniel interrupted, his voice carrying that particular tone of someone talking to a child. "Though one could certainly do better." The words hit like a slap. Sarah's face flushed crimson. "Daniel's just used to a different lifestyle," she said hastily, shooting him a warning look. He didn't mean to offend, but I knew exactly what he meant. I'd spent 40 years in business, and I recognized that look. The way his eyes calculated the value of everything around him. The slight curl of his lip when he thought I wasn't watching. We moved to the living room after dinner. Daniel positioned himself in my favorite chair, checking his Rolex twice within 5 minutes. His attention drifted to the family photos on the mantel. "Your daughter mentioned you work in restaurants," he said, barely glancing at the pictures of Sarah's childhood. "That must be challenging financially." "I manage," I replied carefully. "Dad's being modest," Sarah said, settling beside Daniel on the couch. "He's very successful." Daniel's laugh was sharp. "I'm sure he does his best. But Sarah, sweetheart, you have to be realistic about what kind of life you want." The condescension dripped from every word. I gripped my coffee mug tighter, feeling the heat seep through the ceramic. This man saw my daughter as a prize to be won, not a person to be cherished. "Sarah deserves everything beautiful in this world," I said evenly. "Exactly my point," Daniel smiled, missing my meaning entirely. "Which is why I think it's time she experienced something better than—" He gestured vaguely around the room. "All this." Sarah's face crumpled slightly. She looked between us, clearly sensing the growing tension, but unable to identify its source. "I'll make some tea," she said finally, practically fleeing to the kitchen. The silence that followed felt loaded with possibility. The moment Sarah's footsteps faded into the kitchen, Daniel's entire demeanor shifted. The performed charm vanished like smoke. He stretched in the chair, checking his watch again with obvious boredom. "Listen, Thomas," he began, his voice dropping to what he probably considered a confidential tone. "I don't want to intrude, but maybe you should consider relocating. Sarah deserves a better life." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "Better how?" "Come on." He gestured around the room with barely concealed disdain. "This whole setup screams financial struggle. The furniture, the neighborhood, that ancient car in your driveway. Sarah's 31. She needs security." Heat rose in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "I invest all my money in business. The house isn't what matters most." His eyebrows shot up. Business? You mean your job at… Where do you work exactly? Restaurant industry, I said simply. It's complicated, but promising. Daniel's smile was patronizing, the kind reserved for children who claim they'll become astronauts. Ah, I see. Well, the important thing is having dreams, right? He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages with the casual rudeness of someone who believed his time was infinitely more valuable than mine. Look, no offense, but I make mid-six figures in finance. I can give Sarah everything she wants: European vacations, designer clothes, a proper home. He glanced up from his screen. You understand what I'm saying? I understood perfectly. In his mind, I was an obstacle to be managed, an embarrassing relative to be tolerated. Sarah wasn't a person he loved. She was an accessory he was acquiring. Sarah's happiness matters most, I said quietly. Exactly. He leaned forward, warming to his topic. And happiness comes from security, from knowing you can provide. You're what, 67? Probably looking at retirement soon. What then? The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. He'd sized up my entire life in 2 hours and found it wanting. Every sacrifice I'd made raising Sarah alone. Every night I'd worked late to build something lasting, reduced to failure in his gleaming eyes. I've been in the restaurant business for decades, I said carefully. Learned a few things along the way. Sure, experience is valuable. But let's be honest about scale here. He gestured with his phone. I close deals worth more than most people see in a lifetime. Sarah needs someone who can match her ambitions. The sound of Sarah's voice drifted from the kitchen as she spoke to someone on the phone, probably her friend Emma, sharing her nervous excitement about tonight. Daniel noticed my attention shift and followed my gaze. Immediately his expression changed. The mask slipped back into place, transforming him into the charming suitor Sarah believed she was marrying. Of course, I respect what you've done here, he said quickly, his voice resuming that false warmth. Raising a daughter alone couldn't have been easy. But I'd seen behind the curtain now. I knew exactly who Daniel Brooks really was. Sarah's footsteps approached, accompanied by the gentle clink of teacups on a tray. Daniel straightened, his smile brightening with practiced ease. Everything okay out here? She asked, setting down the tea service with careful precision. Perfect, Daniel said, reaching for her hand. Your father and I were just getting to know each other better. Sarah's relieved smile broke my heart a little. She wanted so desperately for this to work, for the two most important men in her life to like each other. If only she knew what I'd just learned. Sunday morning arrived with the soft light of March filtering through my kitchen windows. I'd been awake since 5, preparing what I hoped would be a peace offering: pancakes, fresh fruit, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. If yesterday had gone poorly, today would be my chance to try again. Daniel emerged from Sarah's old room, looking rumpled and checking his phone before his feet hit the floor. Sarah followed, her hair messy but her smile hopeful. Dad, you didn't have to do all this, she said, but I caught the gratitude in her voice. Sunday breakfast is tradition, I replied, flipping another pancake. Besides, we should celebrate your engagement properly. Daniel grunted something that might have been thanks, his attention absorbed by whatever urgent email demanded his immediate response. Even on Sunday morning, he couldn't disconnect from his important life. The pancakes smell incredible, Sarah said, pouring orange juice into 3 glasses. Remember when you used to make these every weekend after Mom died? I'd help measure the flour. You'd get more flour on yourself than in the bowl, I laughed, the memory warming me, despite everything. Daniel glanced up briefly. Cute, he said, then returned to his screen. Sarah's face fell slightly, but she rallied quickly. So, Daniel, tell Dad about our wedding plans. This got his attention. He pocketed the phone and launched into a detailed description of venues, caterers, and costs that made my eyebrows rise. Everything he described sounded expensive, elaborate, designed to impress rather than celebrate. The ceremony at 4th Presbyterian, he said, cutting his pancakes with surgical precision. Reception at the Chicago History Museum, full orchestra, not some DJ setup. We're talking about 300 guests minimum. Sarah's eyes shone with excitement, but I noticed how she kept glancing at me, gauging my reaction. It sounds beautiful, I said carefully. What's the timeline? May 15th, Sarah replied. I know it's soon, but Daniel found this amazing window at the museum and… Cost is no object, Daniel interrupted. When you're planning the social event of the season, you don't cut corners. Something in his tone made my decision for me. I set down my fork and looked directly at him. Daniel, I'd like to help with the wedding, both organizationally and financially. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Daniel laughed. Not a chuckle or a polite response, but a genuine, delighted laugh that filled my kitchen with its cruelty. You, he said, wiping his eyes. How could you possibly help? You don't even have a decent house. Sarah's face went white. Daniel! Sorry, honey, but let's be realistic here. He gestured around my kitchen with the same dismissive wave he'd used the night before. We're talking about a $40,000 wedding. Your father's probably living off Social Security and whatever he saved from his restaurant job. That's my father! Sarah's voice cracked with humiliation and rage. Daniel held up his hands in mock surrender. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm being practical. We'll manage on our own, like adults do. I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. I understand, I said quietly. Then, I'll just be happy to see you both happy. But as I cleared the breakfast dishes, watching Daniel check his phone again, while Sarah stared at her hands, I made a different decision entirely. If Daniel Brooks thought Thomas Wilson couldn't afford to give his daughter a proper wedding, he was about to learn just how wrong a man could be. I'd spent 30 years building Wilson's elegance from a single restaurant into a 12-location empire. My net worth could buy and sell Daniel's precious career several times over. He wanted to play games about money and status. Fine. Let the games begin. The rest of Sunday passed quietly after they left. Sarah hugged me goodbye with extra warmth, perhaps sensing the tension she couldn't quite identify. Daniel barely managed a handshake. By evening, I found myself in my study, surrounded by 30 years of memories. Family photos lined the mahogany shelves. Sarah's first day of school, her college graduation, the day she landed her first design job. Between them sat my business awards, deliberately understated, gathering dust. I picked up my favorite photograph. Sarah at 8 years old, flower in her hair, grinning beside a lopsided birthday cake we'd made together. Her mother would have known what to do. Margaret always had wisdom I lacked. My phone buzzed. Jack Patterson's name appeared on the screen. Thomas, you sound troubled. Jack, I don't know what to do. My daughter's in love with someone I can't stand. Silence stretched between us, filled with 40 years of friendship. Jack had been my best man, had held my hand at Margaret's funeral, had celebrated every milestone in Sarah's life. What specifically bothers you about him? I set down the photograph carefully. He's arrogant, belittles me in front of Sarah, treats her like a possession he's acquired, but she loves him. Or thinks she does. Maybe, but it's her choice to make. Jack's sigh carried through the phone. Remember when Sarah was 16 and dating that motorcycle kid? You wanted to lock her in her room. That was different. Was it? You trusted her judgment then. She figured it out herself. I walked to the window, watching the quiet neighborhood Daniel had dismissed so easily. Every house held families, dreams, struggles invisible to someone who measured worth in price tags. Give her time to figure it out herself, Jack continued, but stay close. Be the father she needs when reality hits. Maybe you're right, but I'm paying for this wedding myself. Thomas, Jack's voice carried warning, don't do anything foolish. Nothing foolish, just ensuring my daughter gets the wedding she deserves. After hanging up, I opened my leather journal, a habit Margaret had encouraged decades ago. The pages held business notes, personal reflections, plans for Sarah's future. Tonight's entry was different. April wedding planning begins tomorrow. Time to show Daniel Brooks what real love looks like. I closed the journal and reached for my business phone. 3 weeks should be enough time to arrange everything properly. Marcus Chen answered on the second ring. Thomas, working late on a Sunday? Marcus, I need to call in some favors. 3 weeks of careful planning had passed since that Sunday evening. I'd made discreet arrangements with vendors across Chicago, using connections built over 30 years in the restaurant business. Daniel remained blissfully unaware, while Sarah bubbled with excitement about finally starting their wedding preparations. The bridal salon on State Street sparkled like something from Sarah's childhood fairy tale books. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across ivory, silk, and delicate lace. Sarah moved between the displays with artistic appreciation, her designer's eye cataloging every detail. "Dad, look at this one." She held up a dress with intricate beadwork. "Isn't it gorgeous?" "You look radiant in everything, sweetheart." The consultant, a polished woman named Elena, guided us toward the appointment area. "We have several options in your price range, Miss Wilson." Daniel arrived 20 minutes late, checking his watch and phone simultaneously. "Sorry, client emergency. What did I miss?" "We're just getting started," Sarah said, kissing his cheek. "Elena's been showing us some beautiful options." "Great. Let's keep it reasonable, though." We discussed the budget. Elena maintained her professional smile, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. She'd dealt with this type before. Sarah disappeared into the dressing room with Elena's assistance. When she emerged in the first dress, a simple but elegant design, my breath caught. She looked exactly like her mother on our wedding day. "What do you think?" Sarah spun slowly, the fabric flowing like water around her. "Perfect," I whispered. Daniel examined the price tag. "3,000 for one dress you'll wear once?" Sarah's face fell. "It is expensive. Maybe something simpler." "Nonsense." I stood up, my voice firm. "This is your wedding day, not a business transaction." "Thomas, be realistic," Daniel said sharply. "You can't afford this kind of extravagance." Elena stepped forward diplomatically. "We have payment plans available and various options to consider." I walked to Elena, speaking quietly but loud enough for Daniel to hear. "The dress my daughter wants is the dress she'll have. Price isn't a concern." Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "What do you mean price isn't a concern?" Sarah emerged from the dressing room in an even more elaborate gown. Cathedral train, hand-sewn pearls, designer label. She looked like royalty. "This one's 8,000, Elena said carefully, watching our faces. Daniel laughed harshly. "Absolutely not. We're not going into debt for a costume." But Sarah wasn't looking at Daniel anymore. She was looking at herself in the mirror, tears forming in her eyes. "I feel like a princess." "Then that's the one," I said simply. Elena nodded and made a note. "I'll prepare the paperwork." As Sarah went to change, Daniel cornered me. "What game are you playing, Thomas? You'll bankrupt yourself trying to impress everyone." I smiled calmly. "My daughter deserves to feel like a princess on her wedding day. That's not a game." When Sarah returned, beaming with happiness, I knew I'd made the right choice. Elena discreetly handed me her card with arrangements for private payment. Daniel might control everything else, but this wedding would be Sarah's dream come true. 2 weeks later, we'd established a routine. Every afternoon brought another vendor appointment, another opportunity for Daniel to demonstrate his priorities. Sarah maintained her diplomatic cheerfulness, but I noticed the strain beginning to show. The flower shop on North Michigan Avenue burst with April blooms. Roses, peonies, lilies of the valley. Sarah's artistic sensibilities came alive among the displays. She sketched arrangements in her notebook, creating compositions that rivaled professional designers. "What about these for the centerpieces?" She held up a combination of white roses and baby's breath. Simple but elegant. Mrs. Rodriguez, the shop owner, nodded approvingly. "Beautiful choice, very classic. For 300 guests, that would be approximately $4,000. Daniel's pen stopped moving across his calculator. 4,000 for flowers that die in 3 days? "They're not just flowers," Sarah said quietly. "They create the atmosphere, the memories. They create debt." Daniel turned to Mrs. Rodriguez. "What's your cheapest option?" Sarah's sketchpad closed with a soft snap. Mrs. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable, glancing between them. "Perhaps we could modify the arrangements," she suggested diplomatically. "Fewer premium flowers, more greenery." I stepped forward. "What would you recommend for the most beautiful wedding possible?" Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes lit up. Garden roses, white orchids, trailing jasmine for the ceremony arch. Reception centerpieces with seasonal blooms, ambient lighting with floating candles. "Perfect. Arrange it exactly as you've described." Daniel stared at me. "Thomas, that's probably $8,000. Sarah deserves beautiful flowers." Later, at the music agency downtown, the pattern repeated. Daniel pushed for a basic DJ setup, while Sarah yearned for the string quartet that would make her ceremony feel sacred and special. "Live music creates such a different atmosphere," she explained to him, her voice increasingly strained. Remember when we went to your colleague's wedding? The violin during their vows made everyone cry. Violins are expensive tears, Daniel replied, focusing on his phone. DJ plays the same songs for half the price. Marcus Williams, the music coordinator, presented options ranging from simple recorded music to a full orchestra. Sarah's eyes followed the prices upward with visible longing. The string quartet is our most popular choice for intimate ceremonies, Marcus explained. 4 musicians, classical and contemporary repertoire. For the reception, we could add a pianist for dinner music, then transition to dance music later. How much total? Daniel asked bluntly. Approximately $6,000 for the complete package. Daniel shook his head immediately. Absolutely not. We'll take the DJ option. Sarah's notebook remained closed throughout the discussion. I watched her dreams shrinking to fit Daniel's budget, her enthusiasm dimming with each compromise. Mr. Williams, I said quietly, please arrange the string quartet exactly as described. My daughter should have the wedding music she wants. Marcus nodded and made notes. As we prepared to leave, he handed me his business card with a meaningful look. Outside, Daniel confronted me again. Where exactly is this money coming from, Thomas? You're acting like you have unlimited resources. I looked at Sarah, who was staring at the sidewalk with obvious exhaustion from another afternoon of watching her dreams get edited down to Daniel's comfort level. My daughter's happiness is worth any price. The look Sarah gave me then, grateful, confused, but trusting, reminded me exactly why I was doing this. The week after our music selection, Sarah suggested we finally tackle the biggest decision, the venue. 3 restaurants in River North had caught her attention, each representing a different tier of elegance and expense. We met outside the first restaurant on a gray Thursday afternoon. Daniel arrived with his ever-present calculator app open, muttering about per-head costs before we'd even entered the building. Remember, we need to be realistic, he told Sarah, pocketing his phone. The flowers and music already pushed us over budget. Sarah's face tightened, but she managed a smile. I know, Dad helped us make those work. The first 2 venues offered exactly what I'd expected. Decent food, adequate space, prices that made Daniel's eye twitch with each additional zero. He dismissed them with increasing impatience, checking his watch like the tours were personally wasting his valuable time. This is taking forever, he complained as we walked toward the 3rd location. Can't we just pick something reasonable and move on? Wilson's Elegance sat on the waterfront like a crown jewel, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting Lake Michigan's afternoon light. I'd spent 15 years perfecting every detail of this flagship location, from the imported marble floors to the custom crystal chandeliers. Sarah's breath caught as we entered. Oh my! The hostess led us through the main dining room, past tables dressed in crisp white linens, toward the private event space. Each step took us deeper into the restaurant I'd built with my own hands, surrounded by staff who'd known me for years. The ceremony space overlooks the water, our tour guide explained, opening French doors to reveal the terrace. Reception here in the main room, with dancing space and full bar service. Sarah pressed her face to the windows, watching sailboats drift across the lake. It's perfect, absolutely perfect. Daniel was studying his phone again. What's the damage? For 300 guests, including ceremony, reception, premium menu, full bar, and service, approximately $50,000. The silence that followed could have shattered the crystal. 50,000? Daniel's voice rose an octave. This restaurant costs as much as my annual salary. There are places 3 times cheaper. But the atmosphere here is so wonderful, Sarah said quietly, her voice thick with disappointment. That view of the lake. A wedding really happens once in a lifetime, I interjected carefully. It's worth making it unforgettable. Daniel whirled on me. Easy to say when you're not the one paying. Mr. Wilson? The voice behind us belonged to Mike Chen, the restaurant manager. I'd hired him 5 years ago, and he'd become one of my most trusted employees. My blood turned to ice. We always have space for you, sir. Let me know if you need anything special arranged. The words hung in the air like a live grenade. Daniel's eyes narrowed, suddenly focused. Sarah looked between Mike and me with growing confusion. Thank you, I said quickly. But we're here as regular customers today, just looking at options like everyone else. Mike's expression shifted slightly, understanding immediately. Of course. Please let me know if you have any questions about our services. Daniel's phone buzzed, mercifully drawing his attention back to whatever crisis demanded immediate response. But Sarah was still watching me with questions I couldn't answer. "We can't afford this place," Daniel announced, pocketing his phone. "It's completely unrealistic. We'll have to go with one of the cheaper options." Sarah's shoulders sagged. I watched 31 years of dreams collapse in her eyes, replaced by the resignation of someone learning to accept less than she deserved. "Let's discuss it over dinner," I suggested. "No need to decide today." But as we walked back through my restaurant, past the staff I'd trained, through the dining room I'd designed, toward the door of the business I'd built from nothing, I knew the decision was already made. Daniel would never agree to this venue, not unless he believed he wasn't the one paying for it. Sarah arrived at my door the next morning, eyes red from crying. I'd never seen her look so defeated, not even during her mother's illness. "We fought all night," she said, settling into my kitchen chair with exhausted familiarity. "Daniel thinks I'm being unrealistic about everything. The dress, the flowers, the music, and now the restaurant. He says I'm living in a fantasy world." I poured coffee into her favorite mug, the one with tiny flowers she'd painted in high school art class. "What do you want to do?" "I want to get married at Wilson's Elegance." Her voice cracked. "I felt like a princess there yesterday. But Daniel's right about the money. We can't afford it." After she left for work, I called Mike directly. "Mike, I need a favor that requires absolute discretion." "Of course, Mr. Wilson. What can I do?" "I want to book the May 15th wedding we discussed yesterday. Full service, exactly as quoted. But I need it to appear as though the family received a 60% discount." Mike was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. "A special rate for restaurant industry connections?" "Exactly. You've known me for years through my consulting work. As a personal favor, you're offering the family a substantial discount. Can you handle the paperwork to make that story believable?" "Consider it done. The bride's family will receive a bill for $20,000 instead of $50,000. We'll handle the difference through your corporate account." "Perfect. And Mike, no one can know the real arrangement. Not your staff, not the family, not anyone." "Understood completely, sir." An hour later, my phone rang. Sarah's voice bubbled with excitement. "Dad, you'll never believe what happened. Mike Chen called me directly. He said because of your connections in the restaurant industry, they can offer us Wilson's Elegance for $20,000 instead of $50,000. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." "He said you've done consulting work for several restaurants, and they want to return the favor. Daniel's suspicious about how you manage such a huge discount, but he can't argue with the numbers." That evening, Daniel called me directly. "Thomas, I don't understand how you pulled this off, but I owe you an apology. That discount changes everything. $20,000 is still expensive, but manageable." "Just restaurant industry connections," I replied simply. "People help each other in this business." "Well, whatever you did, thank you. Sarah's over the moon about having her dream venue." I hung up and opened my journal, writing carefully. "Wilson's Elegance, booked for May 15th. Sarah will have her perfect wedding day. Daniel still has no idea who's really paying." 2 weeks of final preparations culminated in this morning. I stood in the lobby of Wilson's Elegance at 7 a.m., ostensibly arriving early as a helpful father of the bride. In reality, I was conducting final coordination with my staff. "Everything ready, Mike?" I asked quietly. "Perfect, Mr. Wilson. Kitchen's prepared for 300 guests, bar's fully stocked, flowers arrived an hour ago. The only question is when you want to reveal." "Not yet. Let's see how the day unfolds." The restaurant hummed with controlled chaos. Servers polished glasses, chefs prepped stations, florists arranged centerpieces. My empire in full motion, creating the perfect wedding day for my daughter. What they didn't know yet was that they were also creating the perfect stage for Daniel Brooks to show his true colors. 2 weeks of final preparations culminated in this morning. Wilson's Elegance gleamed in the early sunlight, every surface polished to perfection. I arrived at 7 a.m., ostensibly as an early guest, helping with last-minute details. In reality, I was making final coordination with staff who'd worked for me for years. "Everything looks beautiful," I told Mike, surveying the transformed dining room. "Your daughter deserves perfection, sir," he replied quietly. The team's excited to serve family. Wedding guests began arriving by 10, filling the restaurant with laughter and celebration. Sarah looked radiant in her $8,000 gown, Daniel handsome in his rented tuxedo. I watched from across the room as they greeted friends, the picture of happiness. Daniel immediately began his performance as the generous groom. He shook hands with the servers, complimented the appetizers, made jokes about sparing no expense for his beautiful bride. But I noticed things others missed. "This champagne is too warm," he snapped at Maria, our head server. "How hard is it to keep drinks cold?" Maria, who'd been with us for 8 years, maintained professional composure. "I'll get you a fresh glass immediately, sir. You should have gotten it right the first time." 30 minutes later, he cornered James, our sommelier, near the bar. "The wine selection's limited. Don't you have anything more expensive? People will think we're being cheap." James offered to open our reserve selection, but Daniel waved him off dismissively. "Never mind. Just pour whatever. Half these people wouldn't know good wine anyway." During cocktail hour, I watched him criticize the temperature of the past hors d'oeuvres, complain about the spacing of the tables, and lecture the photographer about getting his good side. Each interaction revealed more of the man Sarah thought she was marrying. The ceremony began at noon, overlooking Lake Michigan. Sarah walked down the aisle to the string quartet's arrangement of Pachelbel's Canon, tears streaming down my face as she passed. For a moment, everything else faded. My little girl was getting married. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" "I do," I said, my voice catching. The reception flowed seamlessly from ceremony to cocktails to dinner. Every detail I'd secretly orchestrated came together perfectly. Sarah laughed with her friends, danced with her new husband, glowed with happiness. Daniel, however, grew bolder with each glass of wine. "Excuse me," he grabbed Kevin, our youngest server, as he passed with a tray. "These plates aren't hot enough. Food's supposed to be served on heated plates." Kevin, barely 22 and working his way through college, stammered an apology. "I'll check with the kitchen, sir." "Don't check, just fix it. How hard is basic service?" I started toward them, but Kevin had already hurried away, face flushed with embarrassment. The final straw came during dessert service. Daniel stood up, slightly drunk, and called across the dining room to Lisa, our pastry chef, who was personally overseeing the wedding cake presentation. "Hey, the cake's supposed to be served with champagne, not this cheap sparkling wine. What kind of operation are you running here?" The dining room fell silent. 300 guests turned to stare. Sarah's face went white with mortification. Lisa, who'd won James Beard nominations for her work, stood frozen with humiliation. That's when I finally stood up. As evening settled over Lake Michigan, Daniel's confidence soared with each glass of champagne. The successful groom worked the room, accepting congratulations while making increasingly cutting remarks to the staff serving our guests. "These appetizers are cold," he snapped at Maria as she passed with a fresh tray. "Don't you people know anything about proper service?" Maria, who'd been serving elegant events for 8 years, maintained her professional composure. "I'll bring you a fresh selection immediately, sir. You should have done it right the first time." From my table, I watched the pattern repeat. Daniel criticized the wine temperature to James, complained about table spacing to Kevin, and lectured the photographer about capturing his good angles. Each interaction revealed more of the man my daughter had married. The breaking point came during coffee service. Daniel stood up, swaying slightly, his voice carrying across the dining room with alcohol-fueled boldness. He pointed directly at me as I sat quietly at the family table. "Don't bother serving that old beggar," he announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "He's probably the poorest person here. Save the good stuff for people who matter." Several guests turned to stare. Sarah's face flushed crimson with humiliation. I simply smiled, the patient smile of a man who'd been waiting months for exactly this moment. James approached our table carrying a bottle of our finest champagne, a $200 vintage I'd been saving for special occasions. "Excuse me, sir," James said to Daniel with professional courtesy, "but this is his restaurant." Daniel laughed, the harsh sound echoing off the crystal chandeliers. "His restaurant? This homeless guy's? That's the funniest thing I've heard all night." James straightened, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd worked for the same boss for 5 years. "Yes, sir. This is Mr. Thomas Wilson's restaurant. He owns the entire Wilson's Elegance chain, 12 locations across the Midwest." The words hung in the air like a dropped bomb. Daniel's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound that seemed to echo forever. The color drained from his face as completely as wine from a broken bottle. "What?" he stammered, staring between James and me. "What did you say?" Around us, guests who'd overheard the exchange began whispering among themselves. Sarah sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, finally understanding why her father had been so calm about every wedding expense. I remained seated, watching Daniel process the information that would change everything between us. "Perhaps," I said quietly, "we should discuss this properly." Daniel's legs gave out, and he collapsed into the nearest chair, his face now completely white. The broken champagne glass sparkled on the floor as Kevin quickly appeared with a small broom to clean up the mess. 12 restaurants?" Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. "You own 12 restaurants?" Sarah moved between us, her wedding dress rustling like silk leaves. "Dad, is this true?" "Wilson's elegance has been my life's work," I said simply. "I started with one location 30 years ago." But you live in that tiny house," Daniel stammered, his arrogance evaporating like morning mist. "Your old car, your simple clothes." "I believe in living modestly. Money doesn't define a person's worth." The irony wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. Daniel had spent 2 months defining my worth by exactly that measure. Other guests began approaching our table, suddenly interested in congratulating the father of the bride. Word spread quickly through the reception. The quiet man in the modest suit was actually the wealthy businessman who owned their elegant venue. "Mr. Wilson," said Patricia Mills, one of Daniel's colleagues, "we had no idea. Your restaurant is absolutely stunning." Daniel watched this transformation with growing horror. The same people who'd barely acknowledged me earlier now sought my attention, my business card, my investment advice. "Thomas," Daniel began, his voice shaking, "I need to apologize. I had no idea who you were. I mean, what you'd accomplished." "You knew exactly who I was," I replied calmly. "I'm Sarah's father. That should have been enough." Sarah sank into the chair beside me, her beautiful face creased with confusion and dawning understanding. "All those vendors," she said slowly. "The dress, the flowers, the music. You arranged everything, didn't you? I wanted you to have the wedding you deserved." "But Daniel said we couldn't afford." She stopped, looking between us with new comprehension. Daniel leaned forward desperately. "Sarah, sweetheart, I was just being practical. I didn't know your father was so successful. Successful enough to be treated with basic respect." Sarah's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. The reception continued around us, but our small family circle had become an island of tension in a sea of celebration. Daniel kept glancing between Sarah and me, clearly calculating how to repair the damage. "Look, Thomas, we got off on the wrong foot, but we're family now. Maybe we could discuss some business opportunities." The quick shift from insult to opportunity seeking was so transparent it was almost comical. "Perhaps," I said, standing up slowly, "we should let Sarah enjoy the rest of her wedding reception. We can talk later." But I could see in my daughter's eyes that she was no longer sure how much of this reception or this marriage she wanted to enjoy. A week later, Daniel sat in my office reception area, fidgeting with his tie like a schoolboy waiting to see the principal. The 42nd floor of the Chicago Board of Trade building offered a commanding view of the city, and my office reflected 30 years of building something lasting. My assistant showed him in precisely at 10 o'clock. "Thomas, thank you for seeing me," he began, his voice carefully modulated to show respect he'd never demonstrated before. The mahogany desk between us might as well have been an ocean. Behind me, awards from the Illinois Restaurant Association caught the morning light. Photos of Sarah throughout the years lined one wall. Her graduation, her first design job, moments of pride that money could never buy. "I owe you a tremendous apology," Daniel continued, settling uncomfortably in the leather chair across from my desk. "My behavior at the wedding was inexcusable. I'd had too much to drink, and I spoke without thinking." "Alcohol doesn't create character, Daniel. It reveals it." He shifted in his seat. "I know how it looked, but I've been under tremendous financial pressure, planning a wedding on my salary, trying to provide for Sarah the way she deserves. Yet you never asked what she truly wanted. You decided what she could have based on your limitations. I was trying to be responsible. Responsibility doesn't require cruelty to service staff." Daniel's face flushed. "Those were isolated incidents. I'm not usually... Maria has worked for me for 8 years, James for 5. Kevin is putting himself through college. Lisa won a James Beard nomination last year. Each of them deserves the same respect you'd show any guest." The lecture settled between us like a judgment. Daniel nodded repeatedly, though I suspected he was calculating rather than comprehending. I understand completely, and I want to make this right between us. Sarah means everything to me, and I know she means everything to you. Here it came. I was hoping we might discuss some business opportunities. My finance background could be valuable to your expansion plans. Daniel. My voice carried the finality of a closing door. I've been successful because I surround myself with people of character. Success without character is just wealth, and wealth without wisdom is just numbers in a bank account. His hopeful expression wilted. However, I continued, you're married to my daughter. That makes you family, whether I like it or not. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a small leather notebook, the same journal I'd been writing in since that Sunday evening 2 months ago. These are my conditions. You will treat every person, regardless of their position or perceived status, with dignity and respect. You will remember that Sarah married you for love, not financial security. And you will understand that my support for my daughter doesn't automatically extend to financing your ambitions. Daniel nodded eagerly. Absolutely, I completely understand. We'll see. I closed the journal and stood up. Through the windows, Chicago stretched out like a kingdom built on millions of small decisions about how to treat other people. Sarah has decided to keep your apartment and continue her design work. She's also decided that any children you have will know their grandfather as the man who taught her that respect isn't negotiable. Daniel stood up as well, his relief visible. Thank you, Thomas. You won't regret giving me this chance. As he reached the door, I spoke once more. Daniel, I didn't give you a chance. Sarah did. Don't waste it. After he left, I opened my journal one final time. The wedding is over. Justice is served. Now we discover if people can truly change, or if they simply learn to hide their true nature more carefully. Time will tell. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.